So who's crying more than Bill?
That's a tough act to follow. I've seen it like 25 times.
It wasn't difficult to convince Bill to come and show this film. Why you said this is one of my favorite films ever? Why?
I think it found me at the right time of my life, and every time I watch it, it seems to have the same effect. I always thought maybe I lived in a very small place growing up, and my only way out was through this local cinema, and I would go a lot. And I pursued that in college, and when that movie came out in 1989, I was taking my first movie class, and it just affected me greatly, and I think it still is tonight. I feel really sad. Like an embarrassment.
It is. You know, it's partially autobiographic. The director Giuseppe Tornatore was born in a small village in Sicily, and he watched a lot of movies when he was a kid, and then he was a projectionist in his later age. As I was saying at the beginning of the screening, this is a film that has an interesting story because it came out in Italy and it was
Flop.
It
was a flop.
And then it came out internationally in a much shorter version. So you want to help us tell the story?
The guy was 32 when he made it. So, I mean, it's not like he was really looking back that far. He was a young guy. And he was influenced by some really strange things. Like, there's a weird movie that Bob Clark did called A Christmas Story, which is like Ralphie, you know, is an American film.
Yeah.
A very nostalgic film, and he was watching American nostalgic films, so he made this, and I think it was rejected, and it was 151 minutes, and then a company in the UK bought it, Miramax bought it for worldwide distribution, and I believe, as legend has it, you know who was involved in properly editing the movie, and it like really worked at that length, and won Cannes and won the Oscar.
Yeah.
And they ultimately released, you know who released a 171-minute version of it, which flopped.
Yeah.
So it goes to show this is the one, I guess.
Yeah, and Tornatore doesn't like the 171 because he says that the original Italian one was different. But it's an interesting...
They followed what happened with the girl who was supposed to be the love of his life, but ultimately... I think where everybody fell out on it was the whole point of the end was he was ready he moved on professionally, and now he was reminded of love, and he was going to go on to find the true love of his life. So it ended up being just a way better ending and a way better middle, faster movie.
Why do you think, I mean, as an Italian, I know why the film might have ticked off some Italians. It's very close to home. He has certain things about, you know, poverty in Italy and the post-war, you know, but those things work very well internationally. So why do you think this film was so embraced by the foreigners as opposed to the country where it was made in?
I think nostalgia is an interesting thing, and it's a really powerful thing. Americans in general, I think, have an ability to be sentimental, whether it's a Woody Allen film or, like I mentioned, A Christmas Story, or a lot of times sports movies do this really successfully. And sports films, you know, like Seabiscuit or The Natural or Hoosiers, or, you know, I think American films can really play on that emotion and that desire to travel back in time, and they're very visual, and the music plays a huge part. And I think that's a powerful American thing. I mean, the proof of that is that, you know, it can be used in politics and ask certain people to recall a certain era and go back to that. So, you know, there's good and bad sides of nostalgia, but I think, you know, in art sometimes it works really well. I mean no political statement in that. It just seems to work in America.
You know, I was watching the film yesterday again, and one of the things that I really love and that I recognize is the fact that in that cinema they were showing all kinds of things. They were showing these Italian melodramas. They were showing Totò, you know, the guy with the strange face, is a famous brilliant Italian comedian called Totò.
Buster Keaton kind of guy. Yeah.
They, you know, it's a Buster. Yeah, well, he's our Buster Keaton, and from Naples. He's a Buster Keaton from Naples, and but, you know, and the John Wayne, all the stuff that hadn't made it through the war, and it to me it just encourages the idea that cinema is a place where you go and you see all kind of things. You know, it's about curiosity, is about getting together and discovering things, and I don't know if it's the same for you. It speak to me that the best part of the film, I think, is that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's the best part of the film. When the first time I saw it, the one thing that was launched on top of just loving the way that movie was written, and we can talk about that in a second, but was, well, what are all these other movies? Because I hadn't seen them. I was like a 19-year-old kid, or 20 maybe, and that led me to explore those types of movies, and that's something that I've continued to do. Like you've seen a million more movies than I have, and sometimes when we talk, you mention like 6 things in a row that I'm like, oh my God, I haven't seen any of this. And then you go and you learn, you know. And I think that learning can happen anywhere. You don't need to go to a college or whatever. Like you can go to literally up the street, spend $7 to $10, and have a great learning experience, you know. And that's what this movie really launched for me. I don't know, with those movies.
You said something today. We were talking over the phone. You said you put your own movies in it. It's almost, yeah. You say that. I think it's really an interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the first iteration is what I just said. I was exploring those movies, but then what happened is I've seen this movie literally like 25 times, and I began to see like the point of the movie wasn't what those movies were. It's in my own life. Like I listen to records and I go back through my record collection and I start thinking about touchstones to my past. And even as I watched the film this time, something new occurred to me. You know the band Styx, the Rockin' the Paradise? The cover of that record is the beautiful Paradise Theater in Chicago, and then the back of the record is when it's kind of in dilapidated form. And that just occurred to me tonight when I saw this movie in the last image of the theater. But you know, inserting your own memories into those parts of the film is kind of something that I think happens a lot when watching this particular thing.
On a more professional angle, as a screenwriter, what do you think makes the film brilliant?
The first thing that I think is unbelievable about this movie is if you've seen it before, so upon repeated viewing, you know everything about the movie after like 15 minutes. Like he literally talks about the fire, he talks about cutting the movies, and this is going to be yours someday. Someday I'm going to get this, and whatever. So there's an incredible symmetry to the structure. And also, like a second thing that's just so good in it is so many little things that seem like vignettes just kept paying off. Like the guy who spits on the audience ultimately getting his comeuppance, and the guy with the square, and just on and on and on, the different characters that inhabit the movie. It was a meditation on change, about how change is okay. At the very least, it's inevitable. And, you know, there's nothing we're going to do about it. And I just thought that there was such success in the simplicity of that journey. There was no big plot going on. There was just a bunch of really well-drawn characters and a really keen eye towards life that seems to exist in these kinds of towns that we all live in, you know.
And there's one thing that I, as a viewer, actually, the one point that I keep thinking I don't know is why the projectionist asks him, just please don't come back.
Oh, I love that. I mean, I think that's I don't know how you guys all felt, but like I thought that was a really challenging moment of the movie that it took me years to figure out. Yeah, from the script. I mean, you know, when the mentor guy says to him, "Don't come back," I was confused for so long, and then, you know, as a younger person, you know, the idea that this guy would abandon his mother and this village and the people, what did that say about him as a guy? And what I think the projectionist Salvatore was telling him was, you know, you have to go forward and find and pursue your dreams, and if you just get trapped. He knew Toto's dream lied elsewhere, and the girl was not coming back. This town was going to be a trap for him, and he had to pursue it. And I know for me, as a kid who grew up on a farm, who was going to see this, you know, as many movies as I could. There was no VCRs back then or whatever. I knew that my dream lay elsewhere, and it was a reaffirmation of that. I mean, I have gone back, and my mom and dad, are pleased about that. But now I'm inviting them here too, by the way. But I really thought that was a challenging moment, screenplay-wise, and succeeded. He pulled it out. He pulled the rabbit out of the hat at the end, So, I mean, that's my opinion. I don't know. What do you guys think?
But that's a tricky.
It's real tricky. I mean, it took a lot of courage. And the guy was 32. I mean, how did he?
It was his second film.
How do you know how to do it?
He had another feature come recent and then this one. But he had been working on this since the 70s when he was working as a projectionist. And one of the cinemas that he was working in, it was just destroyed. So there is, the explosion thing at the end where they make a parking lot is direct experience. Yeah, but also he said that since he was 7, he's been watching things between 7 and 22. He was just watching movies.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing, and I mean, I don't think I know. I'm not used to seeing movies that are paced at that pace. That unfolded very leisurely and very foreign film-ish. I kind of watch Hobbs and Shaw a lot and that type of thing. You may see similar pacing in my work, like Assassin's Creed, not. But but it's amazing that movie to this day can be shown and people just absolutely go crazy for it. Except apparently in Italy. I don't know what's wrong with you guys.
Oh, now I think they've embraced it. Hey, you embraced the Oscar. Yeah. How important do you think is in the film Ennio Morricone's soundtrack? Because it's one of the great Morricone non-Western soundtracks. Yeah.
Well, he's one of the best. I know. I mean, Carter was up here somewhere before. I mean, he's one of the best too. But there's certain people that can watch a film and understand the emotional language of music and how that's going to affect us just right and get it just right. It's one of the greatest arts. I don't know if you guys have ever seen a movie where there's no music or they do temp music sometimes, and you can have two totally different experiences watching a cut of a film with no music or temp music, and then the final thing, it's just totally different. Temp is
music they lay on a film when they are editing, so it's not that it's just something
temporary music.
Yeah, temporary.
Yeah. It's I thought this movie, it tugs on your heartstrings a lot. I mean, unabashedly tugs on your heartstrings. And there are some people that didn't like it for that reason, I think.
This was actually, the score was surprisingly didn't get an Academy Award nomination, which was considered a major scandal at the time. Yeah, snubbed.
Yeah, I thought it was great. And I mean, whether it's Robert Redford in The Natural or this movie, I go down really hard for this sentimental stuff. And it wasn't overdone. I mean, there was crying, but there's humor, and there's, straight drama. Everything was pretty good. The acting bordered on hokey or heightened, I guess you'd say, a couple times. But I always just kind of attributed that to, a different sensibility in filmmaking or something. You don't see a lot of that anymore. No. But it's fun. I don't know. It can be okay.
It's a little enhanced, Again, there is one of the things is one of the model of this film was the great neorealist cinema. So it constantly refers to that time. It's in the same period of history, the post-war, and so it keeps referring to that. It's just a little bit of an enhanced version. And by the way, the kid Salvatore Locascio never acted before, and now owns a restaurant. He's not an actor.
He owns a restaurant, and I can't pronounce the name of the restaurant in Italian, but I believe it means the Oscar of food.
Yes, yeah.
Or the Oscar of eating, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. He never became a major actor. So raise your hand if you have any question. Jane.
Well, I'm going to start crying. Not a question. I just want to say thank you for coming up with thank you for coming up with this idea for this film, for this community, on this 3rd anniversary of the fire, and our cinema is alive, and it's not going to have a wrecking ball. So it's just so beautiful all the way around. Thank you.
Oh, that's amazing.
I think Bill is a big part of the anniversary, so we thank him as well.
There was an idea, a lot of these movies we've been doing them on Sunday nights, and I just thought to do this one on Monday night. Now, even as of 4 o'clock today, I was scared that no one was going to come.
Like, oh, nobody's going to come. Nobody's interested. They'll leave. Who's going to stay up at 9 p.m. It was really a conversation today.
Now there's
yeah,
like
thank you, Bill.
200 people here watching me cry, like a jerk.
Bill, would you have cried if that Marconi music wasn't there?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I never saw a cut of this movie without it, but I will say that ending will get me every time. I mean,
It goes up during the whole movie, and I can't think of that picture being as effective.
Yeah.
To bring tears.
Yeah.
Without Marconi's genius, but the genius of everyone else too.
yeah, you know what I like to think is when the gentleman in the film, not the actor, but I mean the character, was watching that in his screening room, there wouldn't have been music, okay? And you saw him getting so crying and emotional. So I like to believe, to your question, I probably would have been doing the same. I mean, it's just such powerful imagery of that emotion of love. I mean, even as a 19-year-old, where you're supposed to be watching at the time, like, you know, I was really into Goodfellas and rougher films. I saw this and I immediately went bananas.
And there are a couple of ideas that are actually incredibly moving, even if there wasn't any sound. You know, when the screening is oversold, and everybody's in the square and they're protesting, and then Philippe Noiret says, can we show the movie? And then he moves it and he moves it around the booth, and then he takes it out and then it goes on the thing. I mean, that's an amazing idea. I could probably cry to that on paper. It's a very it's a very good screenplay, and there are things that really acknowledge the power of film, and also that suggests who said, do we bring sound? I mean, it's not all together. Didn't bring sound, and then the whole thing where the guy says they want the ticket half price, and they're like, boo. That you don't need music for that. That's really good.
One of the things that happens a lot about that scene, that happens a lot, is like we all are giving interviews or promoting. We're all working so hard together as a community to build this cinema, and we all talk about this collective experience. Meanwhile, it's always proof in the pudding. It's like here we are on a Monday night at 9 o'clock together. It shows that it works. But I've always believed that particular scene shows something that sometimes you get at, oddly enough, like a funeral, or anytime there's a collection of people together in an entrapped space. Sometimes it's a stadium or like a U2 concert, or insert your own favorite band here or whatever. But you feel like the force, the spiritual force is larger than, it can't be contained by the walls of the building. And in that particular scene, they had that window and the design of that scene to move it out. Literally the spirit of the cinema went out into the town and flooded the town with love and joy. That was incredible. And whenever I get that feeling, whether it's a funeral or a concert or a sporting event or whatever, a movie sometimes, it's pretty special. I think we have that here tonight. I don't know. So.
And the other thing that speaks to the spirit is when they have to share the movie, the melodrama Catene, because they have two cinemas. The guy is rich now, so he has 2 cinemas in 2 different towns, and they're bicycling the thing, and you have that bike that goes back and forth and goes slower and slower, and the guy just can't do it anymore, and the people are there, and it's like, guess what? I'll tell you the movie. No, so that's also very good. It's just.
Yeah, everything I thought, again, to the other thing I said is, everything was just really specific, I thought, in this script. Like, the way that, like, the one scene where the guy is saying the lines of dialogue before it's on the screen. So the reason my wife and kids aren't here tonight is, like, they can't see a movie with me, because I do that. Like in this whole movie, who am I? I'm that guy.
The one that spits down,
But I was just happy I was crying. I heard other people cry.
Over here. April?
I was just thinking, the music was so great because it started I can't remember the instruments, but there were just two of them, and it was kind of very, very simplistic. And then as it started rolling, it started to get more and more complicated. And then by the end, you have this full-blown theme. And there was something, so there was that. And then the other thing I kept thinking is there were all those political jokes throughout the movie, like the communists and the rich and the poor, and there was all that kind of social commentary going on, but it was all done with like humor and love and grace. And I thought that the film was like unbelievably democratizing in the way that art, when it's best, does that, and it's usually through emotion. So to your point, Bill, about like what's the most important thing, like maybe there's something democratizing about just acknowledging emotion, which is kind of lost in like the really high speed, like how many bodies are we going to see devastated in this movie mentality today? So
Yeah.
it's just it's so tender.
Yeah,
I just love
it
that.
is, and there's a hazing, like the way, because it's framed with the man looking back on his life, I always experienced a little bit like the overacting or some of the scenes that are heightened as the way memory works. Like memory's hazy, and sometimes the laughter is a little bit louder, or that scene where everybody's crying. Well, maybe they weren't all crying, or maybe the rain wasn't as bad as it was. But I interpret that to me as a way a person remembers a little bit. It's always a little different than
like emotional truth is more
More-
important
right,
than truth,
yes.
and that was so in this, and the fact that it could be collective is so beautiful and feels so much like what this whole cinema effort is. I don't know, it's great.
Yeah,
It's
even the
fantastic.
reality of when he's in the rain lying and the girl finally kisses him and he's like, when did you get, like obviously, it wouldn't have happened to him like that, but that's what it felt like. So it's about feelings, emotional truth, feelings, the truth of feelings. Yeah.
Yeah, and which brings back the sort of autobiographical part where it mixes between the sort of objecting and the things that he remembers.
Did you ever meet this guy?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
What was he like?
Well, he was like, "Oh, you write for that newspaper? I write for an Italian newspaper." And he said, "No, they hate me. Why do they hate me so much?" So I didn't know what to say. I was like, "Nice to meet you."
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No, it was very nice. It was like, I just don't understand. Why do you hate me so much? It was like, well, I don't. It's a newspaper. But it was
I'd walk around with a T-shirt that said like, "I made Cinema Paradiso." If I.
No, he was. It was when I met him when he came for the American Oscar campaign.
Oh, okay.
So in New York, it was the film was already, and it was interesting because after we had that awkward moment, of course I congratulated and everything, and then he said, well, yes, this is not my film, so it's kind of ironic that it's getting all this attention, because I guess a piece of his heart was still in the cut. That in his first cut that was shortened. Yeah.
That happens.
I was really struck by the scene where Toto comes home and the mother gets up and her knitting is unraveling and the knitting needle hits the floor. Could you comment on that?
Yeah. So I thought two things were great with that, and I don't know if it's the same things you liked. There was a whole phrase there right before that was pretty heavy, and he got humor back into the film in that knitting moment, which I thought was really neat. And then I just thought the beauty and the inventiveness of that particular shot, where the needle hits the floor, the thing unspools, and then it stops, and then the camera goes out the window, and you're like, what the heck's happening? And then it goes down, and you see the hug, and the hug is against all that garbage. I mean, that's a lot of creativity for one single shot in the movie,
And it also kind of glosses away from the fact that he hadn't visited his mother. It's like it didn't matter to her. When you see that thing, that unspooling, it's just like she's just as happy to see him. I mean, there's no. It's a very visually powerful way to get rid of a dramatic problem.
That was in the script also, by the way. I was he wrote
yes,
that.
Yeah. No, clearly.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. I think Eric has one.
We just sent the mic to the other side, but go ahead. Shout it out, Eric. Okay. This is for Bill because you've seen the movie 25 times. Central to the movie is this idea or feeling of love, desire, longing, loss, all centering around the parable of the 100 days waiting outside and leaving on the 99th day. After 25 times viewing it, have you figured out why the fuck the guy...
What does it mean? So there's a cheat here. I'll admit to it. In the 171-minute version, they go into that further, and there is a real answer. But I think the question you're really asking is since we all watch this version, what does it mean to all of us? And I think, for me, what it was as a 19-year-old and what it is now is life's short, don't wait around. I don't know if that's the most complicated thought in the history of the world, but that's what I took it to mean.
I was thinking about it yesterday because I saw it and the same question came up because it's kind of a big question in the film. And I thought, I kind of like that he proved it to himself that he could do it, and if she didn't bother for 99 days, she's not worth it, you know. And in fact, when he kind of goes away and then she goes to him, you never know if the second part is imaginary. There is all the dimension of their relationship with her, that it could be just a dream or it could be like a memory that it was, you know, it was not just things didn't happen that way, or maybe they weren't really meant that deep.
Yeah, again, it gets explained in a different way, but the
You got to explain.
well, it's that the old guy's theory was that rather than accept defeat, you should not know the answer.
Keeps love alive.
It's sort of that notion, which is pretty great, but he had to slog through a lot of other film to get to that point. So I think it worked, I think, for this as a question. And I feel kind of crappy ruining the next time you all see it. But that was the answer.
Behind April. Yeah.
I just don't think that anything can be, I don't think we can underestimate the casting in this movie. I just think that these characters, the way that the charm that they exude and the memory that they, I mean, all my life, it seems I've gone back and remembered the faces of these characters and how they interact and just the relationship between them. You know, I'm going to tell you something really personal. When I first saw this film, it was in the Angelica Film Center in New York. And it was during the time where there were some like pretty avant-garde films going on there. One was the Peter Greenaway movie, The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, Her Lover, which was another one of those films that just, you know, took you back. But this one, it was sort of about emotional intelligence, about this idea of being able to see a movie like this and really, really understand what the underpinning of it is. And every boy that I dated at that point in my life, I had to show them this film. And they didn't get it.
What do you mean?
It was just like, that was a prerequisite. You had to like this film and get this film, or no.
The litmus test film.
Yeah, seriously. But I think it's a good one, because it is a measure of emotional intelligence, really.
And you're right that the casting is, I mean, it's ridiculously good.
And several Italian actors that Tornatore wanted rejected the part. So I mean, the projectionist Philippe Noiret, obviously French, and also the Salvatore's oldest, you know, age is French. You know, the adult is French. Yeah. So yeah. So there several Italian actors didn't go for it.
There's just one word that I think is missing, and that is relationships. I really think, for me, the film is about relationships, even the shared relationship of a community watching a film. So from the projectionist and the boy, I mean, that relationship is so central to the movie. And I think what brings it all back together at the end for me is when his mother says, I've called and it's a different woman every time, and I'll know when it's someone who loves you. And I think that, again, it brings it, the circle comes back to love and relationships, which is something he had as a young person in his community. What he didn't have was a livelihood or a career, but he had relationships.
Agreed.
From the man, the crazy man in the square, to everybody else that was there. This was a community connected, and I think it shows that he didn't have that as an adult. While he had gained money and position, he did not have relationships like he had as a child. So even that, the film clips at the end were all about love. And so for me, that's the critical part of this film.
Totally agree. Amazing.
Okay, we have time for one more.
Mine's just a very simple question about clarification. Oh, hi. Did the director preferred the 171-minute version? Is that true, or did I misunderstand something here? And the second thing is, if he did like the longer version where the relationship with Elena was more clearly laid out, why?
As I understand it, and you probably know better than I do, but his cut was 151.
And that's the one he liked.
And that's the one that he showed in Italy, and it flopped. It was acquired in Europe, in England, and then Miramax recut it to 121 without his approval. But it was very, yeah, he was very upset. But then it won everything, and I believe it came to be embraced. And then in roughly the year 2000, so 11 years after, or 12 years after, maybe it was 2003, something in there, Miramax again, I believe, without telling him or without his approval necessarily, released a full cut with some sort of slogan that I can't remember. Maybe you can. There was something about, see how the greatest love of all time actually ended up. Well, it turns out that girl left him for a rich guy. So that wasn't some great payoff, you know what I mean? Like we were talking about, like to your point, like the whole point of the movie got lost, you know. It was, so I don't think he loved the 171. I think he was the 151 guy.
Yeah, you know, he likes, he's, you know, to these days he defends the first cut. And that was his movie. And as much as he's happy, you know, he was happy about the fortune that the film had in a shorter version, he still, but for some reason, that one cut is no longer available to be seen.
It's nowhere.
So we are left between the Harvey Weinstein and the, you know,
Weinstein.
yeah, yeah, and Harvey Weinstein, yeah. So the long and the short, yeah. No, he's done several films, but none of them so great. Yeah, no.
He uses that reality in that scene that you talked about earlier, with the destruction of the cinema, as everyone's just seriously solid in watching the dreams crash. You see a motorcyclist, two kids on a motorcycle, cutting through, having fun, and not having any idea of what everyone seems to be experiencing. Yes. But that's a reality thing that I think fit in there well, because...
Yeah. I don't know if you saw it too, but he also did that with the sheep at one point and a horse at one point. Yeah. And then the motorcycle was the third thing. And to your point, I mean, that's just this keen eye that this guy seemed to have.
And there were other, and then we'll let you go home. but you know, there are other things, like for example, in the way the whole thing about time passing and time passing for the history of this particular cinema, I know the way cinema were shown, you know, it goes from being the parrocchia, you know, in the church, to the guy that wins the lottery from Naples. You know, like all the northerns, you know, Naples is not all the northerns have the, you know, the good luck, and he buys it and he becomes rich. And then at the end, when just about when it's destroyed, and he goes in to look at it, and you have this quick shot pan, and it's a porn movie, because that's kind of what was the evolution. So it goes from the church censorship to titillating to hardcore. You know, that's, you know, it's just da. You know, those things are just really good good points. Yeah.
Do we ever know what he goes away and becomes and comes back?
He's a director.
He's a famous
he's a film
director.
director.
Yeah.
It's sort of implied with that one line where your guy goes, "Oh, I loved your recent film." He's like, "Oh, thanks." You know?
Yeah, the screening room is supposed to be Cinecittà, is supposed to be a famous director, which is what happened to this guy. You know, he went from a small town in Sicily to being a famous Italian director.
Hey, real quick, I just want to say thank you. I don't know where she went, but thank you to Tracy Mitchell for letting us the theater tonight and being such a friend of this cinema project. There you are.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you.
Bay Street is like the best friend ever to this project, and April and you guys, Julia obviously, and Gillian, wherever you are, you guys are doing the best job ever. This is really special.